Perfect. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Watts. This talk is going to be about interactive testing with EmberJS. I am an employee at Simply Measured. I work with Jeremy here, and we are actually hiring for another UI dev, specifically working in JavaScript and Ember. And like we said earlier, we have a fantastic view. So you can find the link here. Talk to me or talk to Jeremy afterwards. We can tell you more about the company. So we're going to talk about quality. So let's say you start your application and you're given a set of requirements from your product owner or clients or something, and you start thinking, okay, how am I going to implement these features? I can do it one way. I can use adapters. I can use, I'm going to create a controller. I'm going to go down this route. I'm going to have this model and that kind of stuff. And you start thinking about like how you're really going to do it. But what if we kind of change our kind of mindset and start thinking about how some of the edge cases that we're going to be running into, or how we're going to test this. So instead of, let's say we want to add, we're going to have a list of items on a page or something. It's like, okay, well, how are we going to know, are there any edge cases that are going on? Are we going to get bad input from the server? Or, what are the other edge cases that we can run into? So what happens is you release your product into production, and somebody comes up to you and is like, oh, my feature's broken. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? And then, you go ask the dev, and it's like, well, it worked on my machine. And so we've all heard that, right? So, you ask yourself a couple questions. Do you have a QA team that is testing your stuff before it goes out to production? Do we have tests? Do we have unit tests and acceptance tests, making sure that these features are actually working on your machine or on like a CI machine? Also, are you testing in multiple browsers? Like Firefox, Chrome, Safari, IE, if you have to.
You have to.
Yeah. So basically, we want to make sure that before we actually release our app into production, we want to have higher quality, right? So that's why we're going to be focusing on testing. And specifically, I'm going to be talking about acceptance testing. So what is acceptance testing? Basically, it's an automated way to ensure that a feature has met the requirements. So basically, the requirements come from your product owner, and he says, hey, we need this list of items to show up on the screen with these pieces of content and something like that, and the user needs to be able to interact with it somehow. So some of you have, I know, I talked to a lot of people that are doing startups, and they're like, oh, well, we don't have time to do tests. And so, they're like, oh, well, I kind of wish we had them, but our quality is a little bit lower because of it. I wish we had tests, right? And so one of the reasons you're thinking is like, oh, well, we have a deadline coming up. And it's like, well, we have to meet the deadline. If I, don't add tests, then we may be able to finish the product by the deadline. But I can actually, I'm going to try to convince you that you can actually add these tests, and it's going to be make it easier to implement new features in the future and be able to refactor in a safer manner. So, right, so let's say you've created this feature, and you down the line, let's say you need to tweak it a little bit, and it's maybe some really complicated feature. But if you've added tests around it, then you can be a lot more confident about changing your code down the line and making a deadline down the line instead of maybe making the first one, which you have to set up your testing framework, and you have to choose your libraries and stuff like that, which Ember gives us a great framework around that with QUnit, and gives us mocks and stuff like that. So let's talk about kind of what Ember gives us. So for acceptance testing, you can do you can say, oh, I can use the, when you type ember serve, you can use the -- proxy, which will actually proxy all your jQuery or your AJAX calls back to the API server, which is great if your API is already implemented and you're getting data back from your server. Or you can use HTTP or ember-cli HTTP mocks, which allow you to create these mock objects that are on your client side, and they're great for using in development. However, they can't mock. They don't right now. Currently, they don't allow you to run those same mocks in a CI environment or in your tests. Or you can use Pretender or jQuery mock Ajax, which is pretty good, and it's kind of like a lower level, and it doesn't have like fixtures built into it, so it's not, you have to like write a lot of stuff from scratch. So basically, that's where ember-cli-mirage comes in. So ember-cli-mirage actually wraps Pretender and adds a whole bunch of other features on top of it that allow us to basically mock out our backend API. So it's built to solve a lot of these problems that I was just talking about. And so what happens when you run your app now, when this is installed, is that a mock server actually is running on the client side. So in development, you can actually use all these fixtures that you've created that live in your app code. So they're not like somewhere else. You have full control of them. And then those same fixtures are also going to be used in your test environment as well. Awesome. So yeah, fixture is basically an object that has like static data that you've predefined that you want to return from like an API call, let's say. So let's say you have a user and you want to pass back, you want to know deterministically that the user has an ID and it has the name Chris and it has like last login date as in this, and so it's statically in a file, and you're going to get that same response over and over again from that file. So ember-cli provides you an easy way to do that. So when you install this, you get this file structure added to your application. So this top level, you have your app, and then it creates a Mirage folder, and then within that, you have factories and fixtures. And so, like I said before, the fixtures are, again, just static data that gets returned whenever you hit an API call. And the factories are actually, I'm going to go into a little bit later, but they basically are a automated way to create more than one fixture in a deterministic, but you can also make it like random. So you can say like, hey, I want this date to be 5 days ago, but then the next one you want it to be some other date, right? So it gives you a little more randomness. And then we have a config file, which is going to define all our routes for basically, you want to make an API call to /users or /contents or something. And yeah, so let's go into that. So the config.js file basically can look like this. So this is what it looks like when we just return static data from this call. So basically, this is going to mock out a API call that has /channels on it, and it returns some contents in here. And this is, JSON API format. So you have the key as in contents, which actually should be channels, and then a couple IDs with names and properties, right? So that gets returned, and it gets stringified by Pretender before it actually comes back to the client side and gets deserialized by EmberData, or if you're not using EmberData, then you deal with it yourself. You have a question?
So does this go through the adapter layer as well? So as it's requested, does it go through the adapter layer?
Yeah. So imagine basically it's not changing anything on the Ember side. It only is capturing all the requests after they've been made. So you make you make a call to this.store.find channels, and it'll go out and make your Ajax request, but it gets captured by ember-cli-mirage, and then it actually returns this instead of actually going out and making the call over the network.
So if the server's running on the client side, does that mean none of your HP calls show up in the network tab?
That is true, and I'll talk about that in a second. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a good question. Okay, so let's look a little bit more into what this config.js can do. So that I showed you there, that was static data that was being returned, but ember-cli-mirage provides you with an in-memory database. So basically what you can do is you have this first option here where you have a callback that gets passed in the database and the request, and the database is a reference to ember-cli-mirage's in-memory database. And so this call will return all the channels that are in the database in a JSON API format. And then they also have shorthands for all these things. So here's a GET request that is basically the same functionality as the one above. So here's, you have all your different requests. You have GET, POST, DELETE, PUT, and then you can add dynamic paths on here as well. So you can have IDs that go get singular. It knows how to get the singular item for that request, and this is all kind of like shorthand for this. So let's talk about the factory file for a second. So when you create a new endpoint, so let's say we're going to get channels, if we want to be using these in tests, we have to use a factory class. And so the factory class allows us to say, hey, we want to create 5 new channels, and I want this factory to fill out some of these default properties for me. So right now you can see that the name is actually being returned, this mock name plus this I variable, which actually gets passed into, if you actually have a function in here, Mirage will pass in the integer value of that number that's created. So the first time you create a channel, the I is going to be 1. So it'll be mock 1, mock 2, mock 3 as you create more and more. So what does that look like when you are using it in an acceptance test? So when you're using QUnit and you create a test like this, the server instance is actually, which is the ember-cli-mirage creates the server instance that gets injected into your acceptance test. So now that you have that available for you, it has a couple different functions on there. So this one, create list, will actually go back, takes in the first parameter of channels, which is your name coming from here from the factory. Another note, the file names under all these are going to be plural, and that's just a standard set by Mirage itself. So in this case, we're going to be creating 10 channels, and so it calls that mock factory 10 times. And so then you can see I'm going to go visit /channels, and let's just say on our side that basically just returns this.store.find channels, and then we have a template that says, hey, here's a class, channels. We want to expect that we got 10 back because that's what the server has responded. So here's another function on the server object that you get back. So instead of creating a list, you can create a single item here. And you can also pass in as a second variable overrides to your properties that it's going to be creating. So in case you don't want what the factory is returning, you want to have it more deterministic within this specific test, you can say, hey, I want to name or change this name to be overridden with this value. So the next one is fixtures. So like I was saying before, this is more static data. So and these are actually imported when you are in development. So when you're running your server, ember-serve, and you go to localhost 4200, these will actually be returned when you make a call to store.find channels. And as you can see, it's in an array. And so this actually, behind the scenes, it actually will convert this into a JSON API format for you. So basically here you just have an array of objects with all this static data in here.
So this is optional, right?
This is optional, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. You don't have to have fixtures. I mean, you can use this primarily for tests, but the nice thing about it, when you're creating these fixtures, you can basically create your whole application and basically mock out the server before you even have, maybe the backend hasn't been completed, it's not even up. You can like have your full app if you know like kind of the specification of what the API is going to be, or which you should be in very good communication with the backend of what your API is going to be. Then you should be able to mock out everything you need with Mirage without having to even talk. So you can go on the bus, right, and have this static mock data and be completely offline and never talk to your server and still be programming and adding new features. Yep. Yeah, so I will get to that actually.
So what's the difference between that and the Fixtures data that you showed like a couple slides before?
So it's the same thing. So you don't usually return this. I was just showing an example of what you could do with this static data. So in most cases, you're going to be wanting to use these functions where you're actually calling the database. And so this database will be filled in with the fixtures here when it's running in development mode.
Or the factory.
Or the factory in test. So factory is just for testing right now. There is a PR actually open that he's trying to make it so you can use the factory in development mode as well, and that's going to be coming soon. But for now, you just use fixtures in your test environment, or development environment. So another thing that you can get mixed up with is model relations. And so this is actually something that Sam, which is the developer of Mirage, he's been working on this pretty hard over the past month or so to try to get this working. And so this is coming, but in the meantime, what you can do is basically mock it out. So this is a fixture of let's say a channel has different messages. So you can say in your channel, you have a list of messages, and if you set up your model in using the asynchronous equals true property, so let's say the channel has a model of messages, and so if you set up that with async equals true, then it'll know to go out and get a message for each one of those IDs. So if you specify the ID of the message, then it'll go out and get that one and return it from Mirage. So as you can see here, the get channels, and then it'll automatically know that get channels or get messages /ID. It'll go try to make a request for every single one of those that's in this channel itself. So I am going to do a little bit of live coding. Let's see if this works. This is dangerous, but I was told that I needed to do it, so it's super dangerous.
Look it up.
I'm going to mirror my screen so you can actually see that. Because that's what you guys want. Yes.
So it comes off the screen too.
See it? That's pretty good.
working fists.
Yeah, this is true. That's the point. Okay, so so I've already kind of set up some stuff before I got in here. So basically, what we're going to do, I'm going to show you kind of the end result here of what the app is going to look like. So basically, I was trying to mimic kind of like a messaging app, kind of like Slack, where you have these different channels, and then each channel has messages and users in them, and these messages have a timestamp of when they were there, and then I want to be able to send new messages that get sent to the server, and then they immediately display up here. So right now I already have coded the, basically I'll show you that this is actually just basically a list of messages that are coming back. So if you look at our router, you'll see that we have a channel route, channels, multiple plural, and a single channel. So bigger. Is it getting bigger? Okay. So yeah, so you have the channels, and then you have the channels route, right? So you can see up here. It's increasing size. Okay, well this says channels, and then it has an ID of 1 there. So then if you go look into the route for the channels, it's pretty simple. We're just going out to the store and using Ember data to find all the channels, which then if you go up to our Mirage configuration file, you'll see that we have a thing to go get all the channels. So like I said before, with the fixtures, what it's going to do, currently we just have one that's being returned, channel 1, and it has 2 messages, IDs that are in there. And I'll show you how we set that up with the model. The model basically has this has-many relationship with the message, and because it's async equals true, it'll actually go out, and for every ID, it'll go make a new request by the default behavior of EmberData. To go get a single message, which then gets returned by this message ID route. So, and here's the message. It just has some user, it has a string of content, and it has a date property. So, pretty simple. I'll go over the factories in a second, and then so basically what I want to do is, right now, this send function doesn't do anything. And so basically, I want to go implement that feature. So what I can do is, in my channel route, I've created a function called sendMessage. And as you can see in my template, okay, so if you guys can bear with me. You'll see that this button has an action on it called send message. And so back in our route, it's going to call this action. So basically what we want to do is go back out to our server. We want to grab whatever text is in here. We want to create a new model of the type message, and then add it to the channel and send it back to the server. So we go back into the template, you'll also see that, we have, this is going to be annoying, sorry. You'll see that in our input text box here, we have a value of message to add, which is a bound property of the channel controller. So let's create that real quick. To add, and let's just have it be nothing. So if we go back to our send message function, first let's get that message. And so now we want to create a new message object from the store. So you can use this.store.create record, and then create object. So it has a property called content. It's going to be message to add, and let's just hard code the user right now. What? And let's add a new date. I've already got moment actually in here. And because it's a string type, we're going to format it, which returns a string. So this is doing well. So everything, refresh, still is working. And this is not doing anything yet still, which is what we would expect. So basically right now we have this message object, and we're going to persist that back to the back end. So you can see it's still not doing anything. So this is getting kind of tedious. So I'm like having to come back to the UI and type something in and try to send, and it's not working. So I'm like, okay, well, what do I do now? Why is it not being added to my list, right? Well, this is where it would be great to have an acceptance test where it would actually automatically do this, run these, these requirements by you, where you enter text and you hit send, and it shows up on the list here, and it sends a message back to the server. So let's set up an acceptance test so that we don't have to keep going back to the UI every single time. So you can create a new acceptance test with ember-cli acceptance test channel, and that'll create this file that I'm in right now. And then, because I'm using QUnit, I'm going to create a new test, and we want to say when you send a message, it gets displayed on that page. So what are we going to do first? So the URL that we're on right now is on the first channel in the channels list. So let's use the helper function, which Ember provides us, to be able to visit channels, and we're going to visit the first one. And then there's another helper called which basically waits for all of the previous promises to finish, and then it will go into this block. So basically what we want to do is say, hey, if, so we visit the page, actually, and then we want to add something to this text box and hit send. So let's say we want to fill in, I believe it's called message input, which is a class name. So if you go back to the template, let's see, it's a very small text box at the very top that has a class of message input right there. So we want to fill it in. This is another helper that Ember gives you, and let's just fill it in with some text to it. And then we want to use another helper and click the button, and the button doesn't have a class name, I don't think. So I'm just using jQuery's selector. So basically, so this is the button. It has button default. So for now, that's the only button on our page. So we'll click that, which we want then to have it go send a message to the server and then render it out. So the message to the server is going to return a promise in Ember data. So we have to use the end then block. And so now we want to say, hey, let's find all the messages that are on the page. And we want to assert that the messages, so find is another helper that Ember gives you that basically is just a jQuery wrapper that goes out and calls, that returns an array of whatever class name that you provide it with. So in this case, let's say we only have that first object on there, the first message on there. So if I save this and we go over, we run Ember tests. Started running. So if you run test server, it will be happy about that. So if you run ember test -- server, it'll spin up the ember-cli testing framework, run those tests, and it'll also start up an instance of Chrome because it uses the test runner framework. And you can see we already have an error saying message input was not found. So now if we go back our code, fill in, so there's two types of helpers actually. So fill in actually is a synchronous helper, so it actually doesn't wait for asynchronous behaviors to complete. So visit is an asynchronous behavior. It goes out and goes and tries to get the page and returns any of the promises, like finding all the channels in our case. So basically we have to have this in our, after we've resolved visiting the channel. So let's move both of these in here. And then if we save this, go back to our tests,
You probably need another and then after you click the button. Don't you?
yes. Yep. So because click is also going to be an asynchronous call, down here and say so if we write it, message input is still not found. So another cool thing you can do is pause the test, which is an Ember helper. So you'll see that when this refreshes, nothing shows up on the screen. Ah, yes, I know why. Because we haven't defined our fixtures factors. So when in doubt, open this up. Okay, yeah, so this actually brings up another thing. So back to, I think it was your question about not being able to see the network calls as they happen in the network tab in your development tools. So what you can do actually in the before each is you still have this reference to the server, and you can actually turn on logging, which will now show basically what all the calls it makes out to the server. So here it goes and makes a call to channels, which is returning an empty array, which is why that is a problem. And then it can't obviously find channels 1. So let's look into why I can't find that. So if you get all the channels, it should make a factory channel. Oh, yes. I forgot one thing. So actually in our test, before we go visit it, we haven't seeded our database. So this is very important that you do this, otherwise you'll run into the problem that we're having now. So basically, like I said before, you have to call create on channels. Is that?
Typo.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thanks. Okay. So now, then because we actually have on our factory, we've said the default for every channel that's coming back is going to have these 3 IDs for these messages. But in this case, we don't necessarily want that for this test. So let's override that functionality. So we can just say we don't want any messages to show up. So there we go. So we'd expect one message to show up in the list after we've added it, and it's not there. So let's go fix that. So instead of me having to go back to the UI every time to test this, now we have this test that should pass once we fill this out. So the next thing that we want to do here is get an instance to our current channel that we're on. So we have to call, actually, if anybody can tell me if there's a better way to get the model for this current route that we're on, I'd love to know. Otherwise, you can just do this. Then you can say the messages, which is a property on the channel in our model. You can push the object, new object, which we have message, which is in the saved state, onto here. And by calling push object, this actually will update and propagate any changes to any bound properties in your template or anything like that. And then now we want to.
You can also do like this the refresh, right? You just refresh the route. I don't know. It's a little intense, but
you could do that. Yeah, yeah, definitely. This will just propagate changes on the message. So,
right.
Yeah. So then we are saving the channel back out. So if we write that, we go back to our test. Voila! Hey, it works.
Yeah.
So now, if we go
Ship it.
ship it to localhost and go to the first channel, and so now we want to add a new message, and there we go. Yeah. And you can see in the console that it's actually going out and making these requests that are getting caught by ember-cli-mirage and these put calls to update the channel. You can see the objects that are getting passed. So this is the new post object. It creates a new ID for you and updates the server. So that is that's
Quick question. Can you do message.channel directly?
where? Sorry.
Just your question that you were asking earlier, like, is there a better way than doing this that not for? Because message and channel are in a relationship belongs to. You should be able to get the channel of the message.
I'm not sure unless you have like, I think you might have to have the reverse on here. So I think you have to have like belongs to or something.
Right.
So in that case,
If you had that.
yeah, that might work.
Okay.
Okay, so that's my live coding, and let's get back. Yeah.
Can you go back to the last bit of code you wrote?
Yeah. If I can close this window.
Not there, but before that.
And the route.
Yeah. So, sorry, I'm a little confused. Like, so usually when you create a record and you save it, you don't have to like propagate it through the store. So what's this channel.getMessages.push object doing exactly again?
Okay, yeah, I can explain this a little bit more. So when you say create record, it actually creates a record locally in the Ember store.
Right.
And then after you've done that, it actually assigns an ID for you, fills it in with these properties, and then calling save is actually what Ember data goes and makes the call back out to your server.
Right.
And so the reason why I'm going and getting the channel is because we want, the channel has a list of messages on it, right, that are being displayed here. So if you, let me show you the template. Maybe that will.
You just created the
synchronizing
a message, but you didn't put it into it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So this message. So this is the channel template.
Oh, I understand that.
Yeah, that has a message property on it, and I'm looping through each message that gets shown up here. And so, yeah.
Okay.
So I'm pushing that new message object onto the messages array of that channel, and then pushing those back up to the server.
Crystal clear. Thank you.
What happens if you request your data from the controller instead of
They should do the same thing. The reason why I usually do it on the route for right now, before going to Ember 2.0, which controllers are going to be somewhat disappearing and being replaced by routable components, is because the actions in the routes actually get propagated up. So if you have a lot of subroutes and you don't want to handle the action on one of the lower level routes, you want to handle on the high level route, that message will actually propagate up through the routes.
I mean,
and
actually,
be able to access.
define though. See where you have a model, you have the store defined. That means until you get your data from the server, you're going to see a loader.
Yes.
And if you don't want that, you want your data to come asynchronously, essentially.
Sure.
You have to request it from a component from a controller.
Yes.
And your test will be.
Oh, because it's relying on the fact that it's a promise being
So
returned.
I tried to do that. That was
Yes.
a month ago. I'm still pissed off about it.
All right. Yes, this is true. So the Ember acceptance tests heavily rely on the fact that promises are being thrown around. So this visit function is expecting the Ember to go through the normal router and basically return a promise out of the model and be resolved. And so, yes, if you haven't resolved your actual model that you're expecting with the route, then yes, this will fall through. And it'll think that it's done because there's not any promises that have been created out of the model route. And yes, it will fail. That. So yeah, let me get back to my slides, and I'm actually about to talk about that. So might be configuration. I'll get that in like one more slide. Yeah, sorry. So like I showed you before, we can turn on logging, which in tests, you don't have to do this on the development side. You can actually, that actually already shows up in the console, but when you're testing, it hides the output so that when you're in, some CI environment, you don't want it cluttered with all this extra stuff. It automatically gets turned off itself. And then you actually also have the ability to access the database directly. So this should actually be server.db on all these calls. And so this is an acceptance test, and you can have access to the database, the in-memory database of Mirage. And so here you can say, hey, I want to get all the collections, and it has all these different functions on here. So you can manually insert data, or update it, or find it, or remove all the data from. So here's to answer your question. So this, when you're in your config.js file, pretender is actually is the actual object, pretender object that gets added onto this object, and so you can have all the configuration properties of the pretender library, and one of them is pass through. So let's say we don't want channels to be caught by ember-cli-mirage. We want it to just pass through back to our server. So you would add this line in there, and it would basically pass back. Does that make sense? Actually, no. However, you could. That's a good point. I don't think it does. You could, since you have the instance of the server object in your acceptance test. So here you're saying server.logging. You can actually say, server.get. Oh, which was another thing I was going to show you. So you could say, here's our server object. So you could say channels, and this would basically be the same as what it was in the configuration, which would be the default shorthand value of being able to get all the channels. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. And it will actually give you a warning in the logs that say if you're using ember-cli-mirage, then if it isn't configured in the in your config.js file, then it'll say, hey, this is not acceptable. You should define it if you want to pass through or if you want it to be captured by Mirage. So there's a couple other things in here. You can define a default namespace. So let's say all your calls have API in front of them. This will get prepended onto every single request that's coming through. Also, you can actually change the timing. So let's say you want to simulate somebody having a really slow connection or something. Then you can actually turn this up to 5 seconds or something. And so the default is 400, and then during the test, it actually automatically gets turned down to 0 because you want your test to run. unless you're testing the latency, and so then you can actually override it in a specific test that you want to test.
What about timeouts?
I actually tried to do that, and it actually just never timed out. So that's one thing that I wasn't able to actually like test and handle gracefully with this.
Do you find any value writing unit tests in Ember, or do you only write acceptance tests?
I do, right? Unit tests, a lot of them. This talk was just mostly about acceptance tests. Yeah. So.
How do you request an error state?
That's a great question. So I will show you. So if we create another test, say shows error when failed to send a message, then what you can do is say server dot, let's say when we post a new message, you can actually pass a second object, which is going to be the return value. So in this case, we're just going to pretend like the server is responding with some error object. And then what you can do for the third value is return a HTTP status code. So let's say something happened to the server, it got messed up. So now when we do the same steps as above, we should get an error message instead of a successful addition to the message. So this is a really good point. And what I was talking about at the beginning is being able to see these edge cases and catching them early here, which maybe maybe it's you're in your app and you're like testing a feature. You're like, oh, I'm sending, everything's working fine. The server is like normally working fine. And then you ship your code, but you never really test that case when that one time it fails and it blows up and you get a 500 error. But here it makes it extremely easy to test that kind of stuff by overriding these things with errors that come back later. So then, if you want to turn off Mirage while you're in development, you can go into your environment.js file. That's part of Ember, and under your development, then that comes with ember-cli-mirage key that has an enabled property on it that you can turn off. And I have just created a blog that I'm going to be talking a little bit more about unit testing, acceptance testing, and some other stuff, talking about how to test components and services and stuff like that. It's not filled out fully yet, but I'm going to be creating some new ones coming up. So keep track of that. This is my portfolio page. And that's it. Woo.